Chapter 113, The Great Splitting of the Coffin and the Small Means. According to Fan Xian's temperament, after the fight, he naturally had to hurry back to his own home and find his own mom, but he never expected Fan Ruo to even glare at him. It seemed that his sister resented that he had struck too hard, so he could only shake his head with a bitter smile and watch as his sister took out a handkerchief to wipe the tip of Yi Linger's bleeding nose. The tip of this Yi Linger's little nose is quite pretty, only pitying that it's like a runny-nosed little raggedy child at this time. Yi Chang's family name is also Yi, and old mom's name is also Yi. Back then, was it because of this reason, so they have been looking at each other unfavorably, now Yi Linger and I are also looking at each other unfavorably. It seems to be a legacy of the elders. In fact, Fan Xian is a very calm person, but at this time the scene is awkward, and it is inconvenient to walk away, so he had to think of these have-nots, to cover up his emotions. After a long time, the crying Yi Linger finally calmed down under the comfort of Fan Ruo, and then looked at Fan Xian with more awe in addition to hatred. After all, she was a woman of the Yi family, and since she was not as skilled as the others, she wouldn't dwell on it, and actually struggled and bowed to Fan Xian, indicating that she had admitted defeat. Seeing the other party's openness, in this way, it was Fan Xian who was a bit embarrassed, coughed twice, and casually asked, "What palm technique did you just use?" "Great splitting coffin." Yi Linger huffed and raised her face stubbornly and replied, "I admit defeat, but this is just me not learning my art well. It has nothing to do with my Yi family's martial arts." It was only at this point that Fan Xian felt that this girl finally had a hint of loveliness, and said with a smile, "The Great Splitting Coffin has a good name. It seems to be a simplified version of the flowing cloud dispersing hands, and it's not easy enough for a girl to have this kind of martial arts cultivation. This flower sedan chair is carried by all. If someone in front carries it, someone in the back has to carry it a bit too." So Yi Linger covered her nose that was oozing blood, grunted twice, and asked, "What stance did you use?" The Yi family were all martial arts obsessed. Yi Linger was not in a hurry to retrieve the scene at this moment, but she was anxious to know what kind of moves the other party's tricky and hard-to-imagine tactics were. The Qing people were good at martial arts, but there had never been anyone who relied on his own true qi, speed, and judgment like Fan Xian, who relied on his own true qi, speed, and judgment, and attacked parts of the enemy he never cared about by relying on his own understanding of human body structure, so as to obtain the cumulative victory. Yi Linger had indeed never seen this technique before, but her uncle had. Fan Xian was stunned, thinking that his set of black fists didn't seem to be much of a trick, and with a slight heartbeat, "They're all just small tricks. Miss Yi should go and treat her injuries." These techniques were a mixture of the killing techniques taught to him by Five Bamboo, the people-reading techniques taught to him by Fei Jie, and the insights gained from his first use of them at Oxley Street. Fan Xian had named this the Small Means, and it was indeed as good as its name. Later on, Fan Xian's Small Means became famous in Kyoto, and became a kind of title that could be included in the mandatory books of martial arts, which Fan Xian could not have imagined at this time. Otherwise, he would have named it Tanyu State Plum Breaking Hands, or Sinan's Six Yang Palms, or some other flamboyant name. But today, the Small Means is always better than the Big Split Coffin. Although this kind of martial arts sparring in the capital is mostly carried out in the mansion, but after all, it is not something new, so Fan Yi in the two mansions did not because of this. Yi Linger, who admitted defeat, left unhappily, but before leaving, insisted on handing Fan Xian the machete at his waist, saying that it was the prize after admitting defeat in the competition. Sitting in the carriage, Fan Xian smiled bitterly as he played with the prize in his hand, thinking that he might have offended the Yi family by fighting with a little girl for no reason. Fan Ruo seemed to have guessed what he was thinking, and said with a smile, "It won't be a problem. The Yi family's children are good at martial arts, as the world knows, or else there wouldn't have been a great master. Mr. Yi is a very upright person, and he won't get angry because of this kind of small thing." Fan Xian sighed and said, "It's not all because of this matter. I just think it's quite ridiculous." Fan Ruo smiled and asked, "Earlier, brother's refusal to duel with her was really surprising." "Surprise? Are you worried that people in Kyoto will think that I am cowardly?" You also said earlier that she is only a 7th-ranked expert, while I am a strange scholar who even killed an 8th-ranked expert. Even if I don't fight her, could it be that the people in Kyoto would still think that I'm afraid of her? Fan Xian smiled and said, although it is true that swords are more powerful than words, if words alone are enough to humiliate and strike the other party, then why bother with swords and knives? After saying this, he suddenly slapped his thigh and said in chagrin, come on, we've already had a fight, there's no point in saying this again. Fan Ruoro puffed and laughed. Fan Xian asked curiously, why does Miss Yi always look at me in a bad light? Sister doesn't know. Fan Ruoro thought for a moment and then answered, she probably thought that it would be extremely sad for her sister-in-law to marry you, and then even though this problem didn't exist, we lied to her once more, and it was like we borrowed her help in order for you to meet her sister-in-law, so she couldn't get over it. Fan Xian laughed bitterly, I knew that there are no secrets between the so-called handkerchief friends. The key is Lord Fei's student. Fan Ruorua continued to explain, brother used this name last time, and nowadays, it seems that many people know that our family is on good terms with Lord Chen of the Supervisory Academy, and it might be because this has slipped through the cracks. Fan Xian's heart fluttered, thinking that he wouldn't let others guess anything from this matter, would he? However, on second thought, the Yi family is how many years ago, in Kyoto for a few months, just based on what he saw, it seems that the people of Kyoto have long forgotten what happened back then. Fan Ruoro at this time handed a piece of paper to him, he took a close look, then kneaded into a small paper ball thrown out of the car window. On the paper were a few words written by Wan Er. The main purpose of coming to the Beifu today was to find his fiancée to discuss what he should mention when he was about to pay a visit to his old husband. Although Lin Wanner did not live with the Prime Minister since she was a child, but after all, she was a father and daughter, always much clearer than herself as an outsider. On the second day, the sky was slightly dark, with dark clouds approaching the city, slightly reducing the blaze of the sunlight, but making Kyoto feel more like a steamer. Fan Xian wiped the sweat, squatting on the street edge of the Sandwich Bamboo Road, carefully selecting the goods on the stalls. Clip Bamboo Road is the distribution center of Kyoto's antiques and curiosities, and people who are interested in these things like to come to this street when the weather is good to look around. Fan Xian learned the style of connoisseurs, 1 foot on the shoulder of the road, 1 foot on the side of the stall craft paper, fingers in the people's stall messy, half an hour, but not a final result. Stall owner some anxious, just look at him wearing really is a bit rich and noble people, so not good to talk more, only had to compensate with a smile, this gentleman, you actually want to see some goods? Snuff bottles. Fan Xian is somewhat helpless to open. Wan Er said that the Prime Minister's biggest hobby over the years is to play with snuff bottles, so he is counting on this day to find a good one. Where did he expect to actually look at the eyes of all the flowers, but also did not seek and be in the eyes of the... Well, you are looking for the right place. Stall owner eyes brightly said, I hear glazed blue and white, jadeite, amber, to which kind, especially jadeite good, great, you see this. He picked up a small stand-up pot, the color of the pot green and yellow, see? Huanyan green, although the age cannot be called long, but the quality of workmanship cannot be said. Is there an emerald green one? Fan Xian thought that he had to pick the most expensive one. The stall owner said with difficulty, emerald is too precious, used for snuff bottles, that's only in the palace system, although nowadays not too demanding this, but if you want to find an emerald snuff bottle on the Bamboo Road, that's a little difficult. The stall owner was very nice and pointed Fan Xian to a big store on the street, saying that if he wanted to find an emerald snuff bottle, he could only go to that shop. Fan Xian thanked, and put down a piece of broken silver to take a piece of broken porcelain, I do not know whether it is true or not, before getting up to leave. Wang Qinian watched from the sidelines, a smile floated up on his face, thinking that this adult treats the peddler's generation with incomparable gentleness, and the key is to be as careful as a hare. Into that big store, is a breeze on the face, fixed eyes, is a pull-line screen fan is constantly shaking, Fan Xian marveled, is not in a hurry to ask the snuff bottle, first grabbed the shopkeeper to ask clearly this fan is who sells, a question to know. The original is last year out of the new goods. The shopkeeper and the merchant has some friendships, so put aside in the foyer as a living advertisement. After asking the address of the merchant, Fan Xian began to ask about the snuff bottle. The shopkeeper looked Fan Xian up and down, confirmed the depth of the other's purse from his clothes, and only then did he enter the back room to carefully bring out a box and place it on the table to open. The box was covered with crushed red brocade, a very soft material to hold snuff bottles of various materials to prevent them from breaking. The boss didn't talk much either, asking very dryly, "Want the good ones, or the best?" Fan Xian liked this feeling and smiled, "The best, of course." Hearing this, the boss actually put the box cover, and the waist fumbled for half a day, took out a light green jadeite small pot, the material color green and moist, without a trace of flocculation exists, is really the best material. Inside, the reverse depicted a sitting alone on the side of the cold river fishing wing, not only the mood of the superior, that the penmanship is more delicate and soft, the handiwork is extremely difficult to see the ghost work. Name a price. Fan Xian took it and placed it in his palm and played with it, feeling a warmth in his palm that felt very good in his hand, a little itchy, a little slippery, and a little moist. 2,000 taels of silver. The boss was expressionless, seemed to be very tired of people coming to buy things, appeared a bit indifferent, but instead, it made Fan Xian interested. The goods were indeed good, the old store's style was indeed just different. He thought about it. He saved in Tanyuzu silver plus his sister's filial piety all gave his brother to open the bookstore, Tanyu bookstore, and now business is great, but the backhand silver has not been put back on their own. So later through the Fuji Zijing in the public transfer of 2,000 taels of silver, in addition to the 400 taels of the flower boat on the flower drink with the use of the wine, and the recent 7 use 8 use, there are still more than 1,300 taels, so a frown and said, 800 taels.